It's truly a blessing to be with you in the house of the Lord, to have an opportunity to talk about the subject this morning, which, as Brother Monty announced, is the evidence of God. You know, over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about different evidences, and as Monty said, the evidence of God, the evidence of the resurrection, and the evidence that the Bible is the Word of God. As Christians, many times we're associated with having blind faith. So, our faith is supposedly not based on evidence, but that nothing could be further from the truth. Our faith, we do not walk by sight, but we walk by faith. But there is ample evidence around us of the truth of God. And so those are the things that we're going to explore this morning. Thank Brother Riley for the reading this morning. The Apostle Paul wrote in Romans chapter 1, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes are clearly seen." What did Paul say? Since the beginning of the world, the attributes of God, the invisible God, we can't see God, touch Him, taste Him, we can't experiment on Him, but His evidence is everywhere, is what Paul said, and it's evident. And it's understood by the things which are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So Paul says there's evidence all around us of God. And for those who refuse to accept that evidence, there's no excuse, because when you look at it with an honest mind and an honest heart, you realize that that evidence is overwhelming. So the first piece of evidence that we're going to talk about this morning is called the evidence of that matter requires a maker. Matter requires a maker. It's the scientific law of cause and effect. So the law of cause and effect says this: for every physical effect, there must be a cause that came before it, or was simultaneous to it, or is greater than it. So this is something that's very common. If in science, I'm sure this is something you studied like I did, that cause and effects, very, very basic, right? Very fundamental. So for example, if you were going to go out to your favorite fishing hole, and just pretend that you like fishing if you don't, but if you were going to go there and you were going to spend an afternoon fishing, and you got to the pond, the lake, wherever you're going, and when you get there, you saw this sign. And you said, "That sign was not here the last time that I came here fishing." And so, what would you assume when you see that sign? Would you assume that that sign just appeared there out of thin air? That sign just created itself. Would you make that assumption? Or would you make the assumption that it was created by some strange weather event? Like, man, a tornado must have gone through an area out here and created this sign and stuck it in the ground right here, so I couldn't fish here. Of course not. Of course not. We would say that is totally unreasonable. You would know that that sign was put there. It was made by someone, and it was put there. And even from that little bit of evidence, you could ascertain certain attributes about who put it there. Number one, this person had some level of carpentry skills. They were able to put this sign together. Number two, they were able to speak the English language, although their writing skills may not be great. But the other thing you could ascertain is this person had some level of authority over this lake, this pond where you wanted to fish. And so we can see those things, right? That's kind of the law of cause and effect. There is a reasonable cause for that sign being there. So let's go to example number 2. So let's say you and a friend go to your favorite fast food restaurant, and you get to the restaurant, you order your food, you get your food, you go sit down, and then you go to the restroom to wash your hands, and when you come back, you see this. And you look at your friend and you say, who took a bite out of my hamburger? And your friend says, well, you see that fly over there on the window? A minute ago, I saw him hovering around your hamburger. He must have taken a bite out of your hamburger. Let me ask you, would you believe your friend that the fly took a bite out of your hamburger? And of course you wouldn't, because there's no way that that fly could take that massive of a bite out of your hamburger. Common sense would tell you that it had to be someone who had a bite radius about the same size as the bite out of the hamburger, like your friend, right? So every physical effect must have a cause that came before it or was simultaneous to it and is greater than it. So at whatever caused the effect has to be greater than that effect in order to have caused that effect. Do you like to go out and look at the sky and look at the stars at night? I think that's a rhetorical question. I think we all like that. It's amazing. We love to look at the beauty of the heavens, the amazing vastness of the stars. Have you ever asked yourself the question, and now some of you probably have, how big is the universe? How big is the universe? So scientists estimate that there are between 200 billion and 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. So you and I live on planet Earth in what is called the Milky Way galaxy. And within our galaxy, they estimate there are 100 billion stars. You know, the Bible says that the stars are innumerable, and truly they are. If you were to try to count the stars, if you could count 10,000 a day, it would take you 27,000 years to count the stars in our galaxy. Each star is separated by approximately 29 million miles. That's a pretty big distance. The Milky Way galaxy is around 100,000 light years across. So if you were going end to end, it's approximately 100,000 light years. That's 588 quadrillion miles. I never deal with quadrillions. It's a lot. If I do that correctly, I think it's 588 and then like 15 zeros after. It's a huge number. If you were to try to travel across our galaxy, the fastest rockets that we have that would take people to outer space travel at about 25,000 miles per hour. If you were to travel from one end to the other at 25,000 miles per hour, it would take you 2.7 million years to cross the galaxy. And our galaxy is but one of between 200 million and 2 trillion. That's unfathomable. How big is the universe? It's beyond our comprehension. So the universe, we would say, and all of the matter that it is in it is a tremendous effect. But what caused the universe? What caused the universe? In 1882, there was a scientist and philosopher named Herbert Spencer who wrote this. Regarding the origin of the universe, there are 3 verbally intelligible suppositions that may be made. We may assert that it is self-existent, or that it is self-created, or that it is created by an external agency. So there's 3 choices, he said, and those haven't changed. So what caused the universe? Was it self-created? Did it create itself? Is it eternal? Has it always existed? Is it self-existent? Or 3, was it created by an external agency? So a man named Conan Doyle wrote some books about a man named Sherlock Holmes, whom I'm sure you're familiar with. And so Sherlock Holmes says, if you're trying to solve a problem and you eliminate the impossible, then what's left must be the truth. No matter how improbable, that must be the truth. So if we go through process of elimination and eliminate 2 of these potential causes, what's left has to be the correct answer. So number 1, did the universe create itself? So if you ask scientists have a theory they call the Big Bang Theory. And this theory says that approximately 14 billion years ago, all of the matter in the universe was concentrated in a tiny ball about the size of a period on a sheet of paper that weighed about 25 pounds. And that this little dense portion of matter exploded, ultimately causing the formation of all of the galaxies in the universe and everything in them. I don't know about you. That seems a little far-fetched to me. But if you're trying to explain things without God, and this is the best you can come up with, and we'll talk about why. But I don't. If you've ever seen an explosion, have you ever seen an explosion happen where things after the explosion were more orderly and uniform than they were before the explosion? That's not the natural outcome of explosions, is it? So, having said that, and speaking scientifically through the things that I have read and through creation scientists, there's tremendous gaps and holes in the whole theory of the Big Bang, but we're just going to focus on one of the most obvious, and that is, okay, if this really happened, where did the original ball of matter come from in the first place? So how do some of the leading voices of people who advocate for this theory, how do they answer this question? So Stephen Hawking is a well-known atheist and evolutionist, and he said this: nothing caused the Big Bang. Nothing caused that original tiny bit of matter that exploded and created the universe. He also, along with a man named Leonard, and I can't pronounce his last name, wrote a book called The Grand Design, and in that they said this: bodies such as stars and black holes cannot just appear out of nothing, but a whole universe can. Scientifically, what they are saying is impossible, as verified by the first law of thermodynamics, which says this: energy and matter can neither be created or destroyed, but can only be converted from one form to another. So there is a finite amount of mass, of matter and energy in the universe, and it's unchanging. You can't destroy it and you can't create more. That's the first law of thermodynamics, which is a law that all scientists agree on, that this is a law. So, for example, if you burn wood, the matter and energy in that process do not change the amount of matter. So it goes through this process. You start with wood and kindling and matches, for example, and there's a certain amount of matter and energy that are in those components, and it is transformed into ash, heat, light, smoke, chemicals. But at the end of that, the amount of energy and the amount of mass or matter has not changed. That's what scientists all agree on. It does not change. It just changes form. So again, the beginning amount of energy and matter that you have before any process will equal the amount of energy and matter that's existent after that process. So if we take this to its logical conclusion, if you start with zero, if you start with nothing, then when you end up, whatever process you put it through, you're going to end up with nothing. Matter and energy cannot create itself, okay? In New Scientist magazine, in a 2006 article called "The Beginning: What Triggered the Big Bang," this is what the article said: the quest to understand the origin of the universe seems destined to continue until we can answer a deeper question. Why is there anything at all instead of nothing? That's logical, right? If matter cannot create itself, energy cannot create itself, at some point in the past, if there was nothing, there would still be nothing. Richard Dawkins, another well-known atheist and evolutionist, said this: on national television in Australia 2012. Of course, it is counterintuitive that you can get something from nothing. Of course, common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. That's why it is interesting, in order to give rise to the universe at all, something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the universe. What he's saying is there is nothing in the natural universe that could explain the universe being here at all. It would require something supernatural outside of the universe to explain that. The fact is that the universe could not create itself. So, looking at our three options, we can eliminate number one, that the universe is not self-created. It did not make itself. Per the first law of thermodynamics, it is impossible. So the second question, is the universe self-existent, or is it eternal? Has it always been here? You know, for many years, scientists believe that. It's what they believe, that the universe was eternal. And around the turn of the 20th century, the early 1900s, Albert Einstein was developing his theory of relativity. And that theory of relativity, he was one who believed that the universe was eternal. And when he was going through these calculations, he was coming up with something that was throwing him off, because it was telling him that the universe had a beginning. In fact, that, along with other discoveries around the same time, led almost universally all science to accept the fact that the universe is not eternal, that it had a beginning. This conclusion is supported by the second law of thermodynamics, which was described by Paul Davies, an atheistic evolutionist, this way: in any change in the universe becomes a slightly more disorderly place. The entropy goes up and the information content goes down. The natural tendency towards disintegration and chaos is evident all around us. And what that says is that everything goes from a position of order to more and more disorder. And that is evident in the universe. It is evident in nature. It is evident in us. As we age, we become less effective, right? Our bodies deteriorate. They age. They slow down. All of those things. And that is true of everything in the universe. Robert Jastrow, who is a astrophysicist, wrote in a book called God and the Astronomers this. And concurrently, there was a great deal of discussion about the fact that the second law of thermodynamics, applied to the cosmos, or to everything in the universe, indicates that the universe is running down like a clock. And if it is running down, there must have been a time when it was fully wound up. So everything points to the fact that the universe and everything in it had a beginning. Modern science denies an eternal existence of the universe. There are three lines of evidence: the motions of the galaxies, the laws of thermodynamics, and the life story of the stars points to the conclusion, all indicated that the universe had a beginning. So the laws of science are teaching us that the universe had a beginning. In fact, Stephen Hawking again said this: there must have been a beginning. Otherwise, the universe would be in a state of complete disorder by now, and everything would be at the same temperature. In an infinite and everlasting universe, every line of sight would end on the surface of a star, and this would mean that the night sky would have been as bright as the surface of the sun. So scientists say the universe is not eternal. There were three possibilities for the origin of the universe. Number one, that it was self-existent, that it created itself, and the laws of science say that is impossible. The second is that it is eternal. I'm sorry, I did this backwards. That it is eternal, and which is number one. The second law of thermodynamics said that is impossible. So what did Sherlock Holmes say? You see, if you have three choices and you eliminate two as impossible, the third has to be correct. That the universe was created by an external agency who is not subject to the laws of nature because he created the laws of nature. because he is not physical but spiritual, that he is not temporal but he is eternal. The only logical, plausible answer to the existence of our universe. Isaiah said in chapter 40 and verse 28, the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary, and his understanding is unsearchable. And he told us in the very first verse of the Bible, in the simplest of terms, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So evidence number one, the law of cause and effect and the fact that matter requires a maker. Number two is that life demands a life giver. Life demands a life giver. The law of biogenesis says in nature, life only comes from previous life of the same kind. That's pretty evident. Life only comes from previous life of the same kind. There's also, in the past and presently, there's a theory of abiogenesis, which says the theory that life can spontaneously generate from non-living chemicals or matter. As late as the 17th century, some biologists believed that some simpler life forms were actually created by spontaneous generation from inanimate matter. For example, they thought that maggots were spontaneously generated in rotting meat. Now, you and I can look at that and say, we know better than that, right? But no one had ever scientifically explained what happened to cause the maggots. And so in the 17th century, a scientist named Francisco Redi, a physician and naturalist and biologist, performed experiments to test this hypothesis. So he put a piece of meat and he put it in a sealed jar. And he waited and he waited and he waited, and maggots never did generate on that piece of meat. They never showed up on the piece of meat. And so critics said, well, you have to expose it to open air. Otherwise, it won't happen. Okay, so he took the lid off. And as he took the lid off, he observed what happened with the meat, and he saw flies going in and out of that jar. And subsequently, there were maggots that showed up on the meat. And so he did a third test, and he put some gauze over the top of a jar, which allowed air in but didn't allow the flies in, and maggots appeared on the gauze. And so the logical conclusion was those maggots did not spontaneously generate. They were there because of the flies. They were the offspring of the flies who were landing on the meat. Well, that seems pretty simple. But what about microorganisms? So in 1859, Louis Pasteur performed this test. So he, if you left some broth exposed out on the counter, eventually you would have microorganisms that would show up in there. And so people thought these were spontaneously generating. And so he performed a test, and he created this beaker, this jar, and it had a neck that went like this, which allowed air in, but it was, I guess for germs, they couldn't travel through that. And so he sterilized it, and then he came back and looked at it. There was no microorganisms in there. And so he did a second test, and he took the same amount of broth, put it in a beaker, and then he opened it up. And sure enough, after a period of time, there were microorganisms. And so his conclusion was the obvious, that life only comes from previous life. Life does not spontaneously generate. In fact, this is from a biology website, but this is something that's concluded by most people. Most scientists would agree with this. The Pasteur's set of experiments irrefutably disproved the theory of spontaneous generation and earned him the prestigious Alhumbert Prize from the Paris Academy of Sciences in 1862. So what that says is that life cannot spontaneously generate from inanimate matter. It just doesn't happen. It's impossible. So this is from a man named Neil Shubin, who's a staunch evolutionist. Says, I can share with you one true law that all of us can agree upon. The law is so profound that most of us take it completely for granted, yet is the starting point for almost everything we do in paleontology, developmental biology, and genetics. This biological law of everything is that every living thing on earth has parents. Every person that you ever met has biological parents, and as does every bird, salamander, shark, everything that you've seen, to put it more precise form, every living thing sprang from some parental genetic information. What is he saying? Life only comes from previous life of its own kind. So to summarize, there is no such thing as spontaneous generation of life, abiogenesis. Number two, life only comes from previous life of its own origins, of its own kind, which is biogenesis. These two truths should lead us to the logical conclusion that life could not have sprung from non-living chemicals. That's pretty obvious. Evolutionist and Harvard professor George Wald in 1954 wrote this: "There are ultimately only two options for life's origin: spontaneous generation, or the only other alternative is to believe in a single primary act of supernatural creation. There is no third position." Sherlock Holmes. You prove the first one impossible, the second one has to be the answer. Correct? A man named Anthony Flew wrote this in 2007. "The only satisfactory explanation for the origin of such indirected, self-replicating life as we see on earth is an infinitely intelligent mind." Anthony Flew, for most of his life, was an atheist. In the mid-1970s, he was in a debate with a man, and the man showed him a prosthetic hand, and it was, at that time, technologically advanced in its design. And he was asked the question, who designed this? And he said, well, this is from the great minds of our time, the great scientific and mechanical engineering minds of our time who have designed this. And then he put next to it a human hand, and he said, and who designed this? And he said, no one. And you say, how absurd is that? That which was designed after this, which is far, far exceeds it in every way, and you say that this is created the design of the top minds of our world, but this had no designer. Years later, he came to this conclusion: the only satisfactory explanation for the origin of such indirected, self-replicating life as we see it on earth is an infinitely intelligent mind. Genesis 1:25, and God made the beast of the earth according to its kind, cattle according to its kind, and everything that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and God saw that it was good. The law of biogenesis was created by the creator of our universe. It is unchanging. It has never changed. So evidence number one, matter demands a maker. Evidence number two, life demands a life giver. Evidence number three, design demands a designer. In 1802, William Paley, who wrote a book called Natural Theology, said this: anyone finding a pocket watch in a field will recognize that it was designed intelligently. Living beings are similarly complex and must be the work of an intelligent designer. The only thing he didn't state there, what he really understated, was that the living things on this earth are much more complex than that pocket watch. But design demands a designer. A watch demands a watchmaker. A computer requires a computer systems engineer. A building requires an architect. A poem requires a poet. In all of these things and in everything else we see around us, someone thought, planned, designed, and completed, built the end product. Design demands a designer. What honest person can look at the design in nature, can look at the animal kingdom, can look at the fish of the sea, and I know that's supposedly a mammal, I'm calling it a fish, the birds of the air. Who can honestly look at this and say there's no design in that all of these things are the product of some random cosmic accident? Look at yourself. Look at your eye. All modern, all cameras, video equipment, all of those things are patterned, they are designed after the functioning of the human eye. And yet the human eye still pale in comparison to the functionality and the design of the human eye. In your human eye, there are over 100 million nerve cells. There are 300,000 trunk line connections to your brain from your eyes. There are 30 million rods that allow you to see in black and white, and 3 million cones that allow you to see in living color. Can anyone say with a straight face that is the result of some random cosmic accident? And that's to say nothing about the self-healing properties of our body, or the intricacies and the hearing of your ear, the amazing engineering in your skeletal muscular system, or your amazing brain, which scientists can in no way explain the complexity and the functioning of the human brain. And we don't have time to talk about those things this morning, but we do want to look at this before I go on. That the psalmist David said, I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. The things that created naturally understand that there is a creator. There is an infinitely intelligent mind that is behind the design of everything we see in the world around us and everything that we see in the universe. We're going to finish with this, which is called the Goldilocks principle, and the fact that the universe and the earth is specifically designed for us. That everything is just right. You know the story of Goldilocks, that she goes in and daddy's porridge was too hot, mama's was too cold, but baby's was just right. Baby bear's was just right, and so on. So that's what scientists see in the universe, that everything strangely is just right to support human life and life on earth. Some examples: a slight change in the rotation. The earth is tilted on its axis at 23.5 degrees. Slight change in that rotation would be catastrophic. The number of seasons would change and their duration. If it were parallel to the orbital plane, the sun would set on the northern hemisphere and would not rise for 6 months. So, wow, it's tilted exactly right to support the times and the seasons and life here on earth. The earth is turning on its axis at a speed of 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. Increase that by 10% and you would have flooding at the equator and the lower sea levels at the poles. Human and animal life would have to live much closer to the poles, and they would have to survive in very extreme conditions. The earth is positioned approximately 93 million miles from the sun. 10% further and we would all be frozen. 10% closer, everything would be burned up in a matter of hours. It's exactly where it has to be, isn't it? The moon is positioned 240,000 miles from the earth. In its position, it provides the night light essential for the migrating birds and the nocturnal animals. Its gravitational pull keeps the earth from wobbling on its axis, and it creates the tides that are essential to many of the ecosystems in the world. If it were 20% closer, scientists say, we would have 50-foot tidal waves all around the world twice per day. If you look at the solar system, if the centrifugal force of the planetary movement, so you look at our solar system and those planets revolving around the sun, if the planetary movements did not precisely balance the gravitational forces of those planets, nothing could be held in orbit around the sun. Can you see the design in the universe? If you look at Jupiter, Jupiter's size and gravity protects the Earth from frequent crashes with comets and asteroids. It acts like a big vacuum cleaner out there that takes all the bad stuff out of the way before it gets to us. In all, there are, according to science, 122 different conditions in the universe that are just right to allow for life on Earth. A man named Freeman Dyson wrote this. He's a Princeton professor in theoretical physicist, as we look into the universe and identify the many, listen to this, we identify the many accidents of physics and astronomy that have worked together for our benefit. It almost seems as if the universe must, in some sense, have been known that we were coming. The lengths that people will go to deny that there is a God. Andre Lind, I guess is how you pronounce it, said this: we have a lot of really, really strange coincidences, and all of those coincidences are such that they make life possible. Accidents, coincidences. Someone named Mary Jane Rubenstein, or Steen, however you pronounce it, wrote in New Science magazine, here's the dilemma. If the universe began with a quantum particle blipping into existence, inflating godlessly into space, time, and a whole zoo of materials, then why is it so well suited for life? How could that possibly happen? You know, and that's the conclusion that scientists are coming to. There's too many things that are exactly right to deny the fact that the universe was specifically designed to support life on earth. Psalms 53:1 says this: the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. The Apostle Paul, some 2,000 years ago, said that the evidence of the eternal God is all around us. He said, but those who chose to not keep God in their memory became foolish in their own mind. The astronaut John Glenn said this: to look out at this type of creation and not believe in God, to me is impossible. The psalmist David wrote 3,000 years ago, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament show his handiwork. For every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. The evidence of God is all around us. The fact that matter demands a maker, the fact that life demands a life giver, the fact that design demands a designer, can leave us no doubt in the existence of an all-powerful, eternal Spirit who has created us and all the universe around us. Psalmist David wrote this also: when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you visit him? We are his special creation, created in his image, who he loved so much that he sent his only begotten Son to come to this earth, to become like us, to bear our sins to Calvary, to pay the eternal price so that we could live eternally with him. If you believe that this morning and you've never obeyed the gospel of Christ, we invite you to come forward and we can assist you with that. Or if you need prayers or we can assist you in any other way, we invite you to come forward while we stand and sing the song that's been selected.